All right, so today we're going to talk about recounting stories. So we're going to look at this story called I Want the Ball. Fred and Ted were playing basketball in the park one weekend. They played almost every weekend. When they got done with their game, Fred grabbed the ball and started to leave. Ted yelled after him that the ball was his. Ted ran over and grabbed hold of the ball. Fred also had the ball in his hands. The boys started the wrestle and fight over who the ball belonged to. Excuse me. Fred lived next to the park and his mom heard what was happening. She walked outside and over to the basketball court. She told the boys to let go and they would figure out something fair to do with the ball. She thought for a moment and then had an idea. Fred's mom said that they could keep the ball next to their house. If Ted wanted to use it, he could just grab it since they lived next to the park. Besides, the boys played together almost every weekend. They would likely not play alone. So it did not matter who owned the ball. Fred's mom had come up with a good solution. So we have to find out who are the characters. So I'm going to go through, use my highlighter tool here. Make this a little bit less thick. Okay. And I see Fred. I see Ted. And I see Fred and his mom. And Fred's mom. Let's go down here and highlight her name since it really says Fred's mom down here. Okay. So then what I'm going to answer to that, oh, sorry. My answer to that is going to be the characters in the story are Fred, Ted, and Fred's mom. Make that a little bit bigger since we got some space. Okay. And let's change the color so that that may be a little bit too light for the 40. Let's. All right. Now, where does the text take place? So let's look here. They talk about the park. Hold on one second. Let me go here again. Sorry about that. Park. They got down with the game, started to leave. They're fighting over the ball. They're still at the park. She thought for a moment. So really it all happened really in the park. So let's go over here. Go here. I think they thought I wanted to highlight this, but I did not want to highlight that. All right, so I'm going to say that, hold on 1 minute. The story takes place at the park, and I'm going to assume that the time of day would be during the day. Probably like fall, if I had to guess based on the clothing that they have on. Okay, and there, here. Let me make that bigger. Okay, story takes place at the park during the day. What is the problem? Well, let's see. When they got done with their game, Fred grabbed the ball and started to leave. Ted yelled after him that the ball was his. Ted ran over and grabbed hold of the ball. So they were fighting over who the basketball belonged to. So let's change that. The boys fought over who the basketball belonged to. All right. How did the characters solve the problem? Well, I remember that Fred's mom had to come out and she suggested keeping it outside of their house because the park was right there, right next to their house. All right, so Fred's mom came out and told the boys they could keep the ball outside Fred's house since he lived close to the park. Ted could get it when he, sorry, let me move this up some, when he wanted it. Okay. And maybe we'll move that out. There we go. Okay. Now, I'm going to go look at the next page for more questions. What happens in the beginning? Let's go back here. In the beginning, we're going to highlight in yellow. Fred and Ted were playing basketball in the park one weekend. Ooh, that was what I did not put in the setting. Fred and Ted during the day on the weekend. Uh-oh. Okay. Move this down so that you can tell it's different. Okay, what happens in the beginning? They're playing in the park one weekend. They played almost every weekend. Got done with their game. Fred grabbed the ball and started to leave. Okay, so they were at the park playing basketball and they started fighting over the ball. They were at the park playing or finishing their basketball game and started fighting over the ball. Okay. And I did not need a comma there. That's why it's doing those lines. All right. And then what happens next? Remember, we don't have to go exactly after because they give a lot of details about them going back and forth. The boys started to wrestle and fight over who the ball belonged to. Fred lived next to the park and his mom heard what was happening. She walked outside and over to the basketball court. She told the boys to let go and they would figure out something fair to do with the ball. She thought for a moment and had an idea. Okay, so Fred's mom comes out. Fred's mom comes out when she hears them fighting and tells them they will have to. She says to figure out something fair. She thought about what to do next. Okay. Then at the end, Fred's mom said they would keep the ball next to their house. That way, oh, that is close to the park. That way both boys can get the ball, play with if they want it. And they also usually they played together every weekend anyway. So usually they were just together there anyway, so. All right. And that's recounting the story. So if I was going to recount it with words, I would talk about each of these parts, remembering to include the characters, the setting, the problem, and solution, as well as the beginning, the middle, and the end.